In this lesson, we're going to discuss data collection procedures. During an incident response, we often need to collect evidence of the cyber attack for further analysis. For example, if your main server has been infected with some kind of malware as part of an attack, you want to get that cleared up and get the server back online as quickly as possible to minimize the disruption to your operations. But if you do that, you may erase the evidence of the attack that will make it impossible to figure out who did it. Now, to overcome this challenge, we often use digital forensic collection techniques to make forensic images of the data on the servers, and we use that as evidence for later analysis. Doing that allows your incident response team to help you get your server back online as quickly as possible and resume operations, but also maintain the evidence. Your incident response team may need the evidence because they may be working with law enforcement. And if you're doing that, you're probably going to seek criminal prosecution for the attacker who broke into your system. As part of your data collection and evidence collection efforts, you're going to do a lot of different things. For example, you're going to capture and hash the system images. This means you're going to use tools like FTK Imager to make an exact copy of the server's hard drive and then hash it to make sure it doesn't change while you're analyzing it. Then you're going to analyze the data you collected using software tools. You're going to use forensic tools like FTK, the Forensic Toolkit, or Encase. Then you're going to have to capture screenshots of the machine. What was the machine looking like when you arrived on the scene? You want to capture pictures of that so you know exactly what it looked like. You might also go back and look at your network traffic logs and captures and go and review all of that and see how they move throughout the network as you're trying to trace back the attack. And if you think someone was physically on your property, you may want to capture video from the closed circuit TV. Now, as you're collecting this data and evidence, you want to consider the order of volatility, which means which order things get modified quickest. The quickest thing that gets modified is the cache inside of the processor, then the memory, then the swap files, then the hard drives, right? And you think about which one is going to get changed first. When you do that, you have to collect things based on that order as well. And anything on the victim machine can be modified if there's a threat actor on the machine, right? We also want to collect the evidence as quickly as possible. Then we want to take statements from witnesses and administrators. What did they see? What made them think that there was an incident? Maybe there was just someone who said, hey, the mouse from our computer all of a sudden started jumping all over the screen. That's something you need to collect the information from and figure out, why did that happen? Then we want to review our licensing and documentation and figure out, do we have the proper license for all of our systems? And do we understand how they work? And are they working the way that they were designed based on the documentation? And then, of course, we're going to track our man hours and our expenses because at the end of the day, this is an incident response. Someone's going to say, how much did it cost us? And if you look at the most recent data breaches in the USA, large companies are suffering millions and millions of dollars of losses in the cost of these data breaches, both in the response efforts as well as the value of the data that was lost. Now that we have some basic understanding, let's talk about data acquisition. Data acquisition is the method and tools used to create forensically sound copy of the data from a source device, such as system memory or hard disk. Now, when you deal with acquisition, the first question you have to ask, do I have the right to search or seize this thing legally? This is an important question because in your organization, not all devices are owned by the company. If it's owned by the company, yeah, you have the right to go ahead and collect it because you work for that company and they want you to do it. But what if you're allowed to bring your own device? If you're allowed to bring your own device into the organization, these policies can get very complicated very quickly because you might not be legally able to search or seize that device because you don't own it. The employee does. And so you have to make sure that the evidence you're gathering, you have permission to gather it. Otherwise, the search could be inadmissible. Another thing that makes data acquisition very complicated is that when you get to a crime scene, you're not just dealing with the physical world, you're dealing with the digital world. And so when I come into a room and I see the lights are on, the computer is on, how am I going to collect the data off of that computer? Am I going to shut it down? Am I going to power it off? Am I going to collect it when it's powered on? All of these are valid options and each one has its drawbacks and benefits depending on what you're trying to collect. But for now, I just want you to keep in mind the fact that you're dealing with a digital crime scene as opposed to just a physical one. There is some evidence that could be lost when you turn off a computer or shut it down. And so you need to make sure that you understand what you're going to do and the procedures that you're going to deal with. Now, this brings us to the idea that some of this data can only be collected when the system is on. some of the data can only be collected once the system is shut down or you suddenly remove the power. Now, an analyst always has to think about the order of volatility when they collect their evidence. First, we always want to collect anything that is short-term, anything that is highly volatile. So if you start thinking about things like the CPU registers and the cache memory, that is very small amount of memory inside that processor. So it's getting changed very frequently, so you want to collect that as soon as possible. Then we move on to other volatile memory, which are things like system memory, routing tables, ARP caches, process tables, temporary swap files, and things like that. All of those things are volatile and are changing quite rapidly, but not nearly as quickly as the CPU register or cache memory. Then we move on to data that's on persistent mass storage. Now, in the old days, we would just say hard drive, but nowadays, we just say mass storage because this includes our hard drive, our solid state drives, and our flash drives. All of these are persistent mass storage devices because they will retain information when you take the power away, unlike memory. But it does still change quite often as long as the computer is on and people are writing or reading to that disk. Then we're going to go ahead and collect the things that are remotely logged, things like our SIEM and monitoring data. This is important because while it is not on the system that you're analyzing, it was already remotely logged somewhere else. That other place somewhere else is still being read and written to over and over again by other systems, and so it could modify some data, so we want to collect that as well. After that, we want to get anything that's physical. This is the physical configuration and network topology and things of that nature. So if I go into the network and I start looking at the way it's wired and just say, okay, this computer was talking to a switch, which talks to this router, and I can start mapping out and collecting that information. After that, we're going to collect archival media. Now, what is that? It's things like backup tapes and offsite storage, things that are written once and then aren't touched again. For instance, you might write something to a CDR or a DVR. Once it's written to that disk, it's going to maintain that data on it until you destroy the disk. So it is our lowest priority of collection, but still something we want to collect at the end of the day. Now, one piece of warning that I want to give you is something that a lot of junior analysts will neglect to think about. When you're dealing with the Windows registry, a lot of people think about the Windows registry as being on the hard disk. And while most of the Windows registry is stored on the hard disk, there are many key areas like the HKLM/hardware component that only stores themselves in memory. So you want to analyze that registry part using a memory dump instead. When I analyze the registry, I usually do it via memory dump first, and then I can go back and do it off the hard drive afterward. That way, anything that was missed in memory might get caught by the hard drive, and I could see both things. When you're dealing with things like the /hardware hive, it's really important to capture that because it's going to record every single disk that has been connected to or taken out of that computer. If I use a thumb drive on the computer, it's going to be logged in that hardware hive. So that would tell me as an analyst that I need to start looking for that thumb drive or that flash drive so I can find data that was written off of this computer. And so that's one of the reasons why it's really important to think about it. So remember, when it comes to data acquisition, we're talking about the method and tools used to create a forensically sound copy of the data from a source device such as a system memory or hard disk. When performing data acquisition, always follow your documented processes and procedures to ensure that you don't contaminate or lose any potential evidence of a cyber attack for the investigation that you're responding to.